have joined. Looks like we have Tara and Mary, Diane, Catherine, Alejandro. We'll wait another minute and then we'll get started. This is an hour-and-a-half session, so we know it's kind of lengthy, but we had a session yesterday and we cut it right to the very end, right to the last minute. So we do have quite a bit to cover. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. This is Suzanne Moradalin, and we're very happy to offer this second annual Provider Appointment Availability Survey webinar. It was a really big hit last year, and we decided to provide it again this year. And so thank you in advance for your time. We realize an hour and a half, 90 minutes is quite a long time. However, we did take it to almost the last minute yesterday, and so we have quite a bit of content to cover. A couple of housekeeping items. There are about 15 folks that are supposed to join today, so we ask that you please have your phone on mute. We will be stopping throughout the presentation for questions. And then certainly you can use, I will have the chat window open. You can send the question to everyone or directly to me, and then we will do our best to answer your question. Again, we'll be stopping throughout the presentation and then at the end. And so welcome to all of you. This is a webinar that's open to all of our clients, our partners, for PAAS, survey administration, and validation. This session is being recorded as it was yesterday. So for those of you that are interested in receiving the recording as well as the slides, then we will provide that. We will also post this on our resources page, on the website. Okay. And I should ask, can everyone hear me okay? You can unmute and say yes. Just want to confirm that you hear my voice okay. Yep? Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So today we are going to be covering about the key personnel, folks that are part of the PAAS team. We're also going to be going over the requirements and highlight specifically the methodology changes for 2019. We're going to go over some key milestones and deadlines, as well as discuss what are your responsibilities as our partner, and then what are our responsibilities. And then talk about naming conventions on the various files, as well as data exchange requirements, and then identify some important resources. Next slide. Okay. So key personnel. So I'm Suzanne Dallin, as I mentioned, and the principal and president of Two Metrics. I serve as executive lead and sponsor of the PAAS program. As many of you know, you're a repeat partners that I've been very involved in the very beginning, into the weeds in the detail of PAAS, and but at this point, serving as the lead and kind of sponsor of the program, ensuring that all the deliverables are completed. Jim Dolan is our programming analytics lead and does all of the architecture for programming and has from MY2019. And then Stacey Baker, who you all know and love, is our compliance officer, VP of Regulatory Affairs. She served as a senior kind of project manager and client manager with you last year. And this year will be in a more regulatory advisor and oversight role. Erin McGlone is new to our team, and she is our new survey program administrator, and will be working directly with you throughout this MY2019. Certainly, Stacey and I and Jim are still available, but she will be your primary contact, and it will be ensuring that she remains in contact with you throughout the rest of the year. Rob O'Brien is our senior programmer and data engineer. And then Jeff Lucas is another addition to our team. We're very pleased to have Jeff, who will be managing your data every single day. And so we will talk a lot about those activities later on. Next slide. Okay. So we are a California-based and focused audit and consultancy firm. As many of you know, we service health plans as well as provider groups. We have a really solid understanding of not only NCQA, but also state, for California specifically, DMHC, DHCS, and then federal requirements. And then our goal is to make sure that that we're providing that value add to your organization. We've worked in health plans for a really long time in the medical group setting as well. So we feel very strongly about our various areas of expertise. And we're a woman minority-owned business, so we're very happy about that. And we're pursuing federal aid designation as well as MBE certification. Next slide. So I want to talk just a little bit before we get into the detail of PAAS, our areas of expertise. So in the fall, we went through a website kind of overhaul and spent a lot of time kind of detailing our various services. And I wanted to take the time to just mention that today, because as we've done our lesson learned and our debrief sessions with you, we've talked about other services, and I've had plans say, hey, I didn't know you guys did that. Oh my gosh, I wish I would have known. And so I want to share what some of those items or those areas are. Next slide. And I'll hand it over to Jim to first talk about the area of advanced analytics. All of these services, there's a lot more detail on our website under the services window. Go ahead, Jim.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to speak with you. I'll go through these relatively quickly. So our team has been working in managed care for 20, 25 years and done a variety of things. So in advanced analytics, we can certainly help with risk score improvement, quality measure improvement, be it just basic reporting or statistical analyses. Predictive modeling, we can help you with creating predictive models for you, be that for risk scores, be that for identifying folks for outreach, be that for quality improvement, or we can help you with refining and enhancing your existing models. Everyone's probably done something, and there's a broad hierarchy of models that can be used, and we can help you go to the next level. Risk score optimization, as I mentioned, we can help you either do predictive modeling or suspect target lists or prospective or retrospective outreach, whatever this, help you with strategies to improve your risk scores. Also managed care data and reporting. We can help with basic reporting in the managed care world. Like I said, we've been doing that for a long time. Help your management, provide your management with data to make data-driven decisions. We think that's very important. We can help you develop some just basic data marks, nothing fancy, but it'll allow you to do. I'm going to do fancy too, but you don't need to. But to have the data you need to do those analyses, and also create some dashboards to see where you're at and monitor your operations. And then also encounter data completeness. We've been spending a lot of time recently helping some of our clients with the completeness of their encounter data. As you know, encounter data or data for capitated visits or $0 claims sometimes aren't nearly as complete as fee-for-service claims. And those are extraordinarily important in determining quality metrics and your risk scores, as well as identifying the condition profile of your health plan. So we can work with you to identify any leakage points, help you improve your processes for capturing those data and assessing those data. We can work with you also on making sure that the data that we have are accepted by various clearinghouses, or identify whether they're rejected prior to getting to you, the various clearinghouses. Does anyone add anything to that?
Sure. Just one item. So we know that for many of you that are on the line right now, you have a Medi-Cal product. So as you know, DHCS is moving towards rate setting using 100% encounter data. So this is a really challenging time. Most of you or all of you who have Medi-Cal products have already probably received your stoplight reports. And so typically with the state and the Fed, it takes some time to kind of roll those initiatives out, but they're moving very quickly. And so we're seeing a lot of activity in this area. So we are currently working with a very large MSO with various IPAs and helping them really close the gaps in areas of leakage. And that's important as a health net. You make sure that your provider groups, your IPA, your provider network is submitting that data appropriately. Otherwise, your premium from DHCS will be impacted. So we're focusing a lot of time and effort in this area. Okay, quality and value-based performance reporting. So as most of you know, and I think I may have served as your HEDIS auditor at one point or another, I still do HEDIS audit. This is my 14th year. So we have extensive experience in quality reporting as well as HEDIS and STARS improvement. Actually, Jim was a HEDIS auditor years ago. And so we have a lot of that experience in looking at not only practitioner data, credentialing, enrollment processes, as well as supplemental data and data integration. And then as ECDS measures, the electronic clinical measures, are becoming reportable, that's going to be a really important area of focus and review. Next slide. Paper performance, which is now called Align, Measure, and Perform. So the Integrated Healthcare Association manages or oversees the paper performance program in the state of California. California is the only state that has an audited program that is aligned with HEDIS for provider organizations. And so these audits are done for about 14 years as well. And so as a health plan, either if you're a stakeholder or not, it's important to not only have the education to your provider groups to help them understand and self-report if they wish the various paper performance measures. What was new in the fall is that Medi-Cal or Medicaid is now a product that is part of the P4P or Align, Measure, Perform program. For years, it's been Medicare commercial. So SUHCs have been asking for education on paper performance, and this is an area that we have a lot of expertise and can assist with this. And then I mentioned supplemental data review. If there's certain measures that you're just not meeting the threshold of performance standards, is we can help with reviewing what are some of the data feeds that you may be missing out with with EMRs, practice management systems, to be able to bump up your data and have a more robust and also accurate reporting of the services that are being provided to your membership. And I'll pass it over to Stacey to talk about regulatory compliance and oversight.
Thanks, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. This is Stacey Baker. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. So yeah, I'm just going to touch on a few of the regulatory services that we offer. So we have just a general regulatory bucket here where we can offer, support to your compliance team. I know there's very busy, a lot to do all the time. Help with gap analysis, policy and procedure review or development, regulatory filing assistance, implementation of new laws, any of those items. And then also what you're all here for today is the provider appointment availability survey. We obviously administer the survey. We're also a validator. We seek permission every year or affirmation every year from the department, and we have documentation confirming that we're allowed to serve in both roles. And it actually has really served us well to be able to have a validator view when we're administering a survey. And then on the provider satisfaction and after-hours survey, so we've also administered those surveys on your behalf and create detailed reports for you. Next slide. And then a new service, we have some clients ask for assistance with this just because, as we all know, the department has gotten so, nitpicky, and they'll go back in past years and pick, one thing that maybe you forgot to include in your filing, like your, provider stat report didn't include one element, okay? So we can serve as that second eye for you to do, a review of all of the other elements of your TAR file. It's not just these templates, the raw data and results templates, administering the survey. There's also the A through F data, which is, our filing requirement, which is your policies and procedures, your triage program, your grievance process, your provider stat survey, and all of the elements that are required to be in that. And then in addition to that, similar to how we do the analysis of your contact list files for format completeness and compliance, we can do that for your network filing forms, RAG data forms. Okay, next slide. Okay, just a little slide about our background and qualification. So we've been doing this since 2016 when the department really kind of blew things up and created a whole new process of requiring the validation for the PAAS survey and really making a lot of changes to the methodology, and the first all-parent letter came out. So we were, right there off the gate with the first validation in 2016. And then also, if you know about me, before I joined QMetrics, I was actually in your role. I worked for a health plan, and so I've worked on this filing myself and seen it through the evolution, as I'm sure you have too. So, and then we've expanded our services throughout the time with administering the services of the survey, doing a provider satisfaction survey, and the after-hours survey. And we have a wide variety of clients. And Suzanne, I don't know if you want to chime in on this at all?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, we just had that, we've been involved in the very beginning when the first APL came out in February of 2017 regarding the validation requirements. So we also have behavioral health clients as well for PAAS that helps us kind of understand what's happening at the state level with behavioral health.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, this is really fun what you're here for. So we're going to, I'm just going to go over, the main parts of the 2019 methodology and point out some of the key changes from last year. Here are the 9 topics I'm going to touch on. I'm not going to list them all out. They follow the methodology structure. So let's just get into it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm just here a few points. Some of the primary changes in the survey structure. Fortunately, as we all know, the department has, over the past few years, been changing the methodology pretty drastically each year. And last year it was a huge change, with requiring, the analysis based on the network and county as opposed to provider group and product line and the 3-pronged approach. So there were a lot of changes last year. Luckily, overall, it's a very similar approach to last year, but I am going to point out several changes. So one big change from last year is that the methodology is requiring plans to report on and survey any contracted providers that are outside of the planned service area. In the past, the plans were only required to survey those providers that are inside the service area. So for some of you, it most likely will expand the provider count that you will need to survey and include on your contact list. Also, the methodology has provisions for including telehealth providers and advanced access providers. All of this I'm going to be going into more detail in the following slides. Also, the provider survey types to be surveyed, although generally the 5 survey types have stayed the same, the department has made some changes as far as the actual licensure or specialty types that fall within those overarching survey types. And then target sample sizes. Last year, if you recall, there were 2 target sample size charts, one for single and one for multiple counties. Now we're back to 1. And then I'll discuss later about the applicability to the census approach. And then the department, as they do it every year, made changes to the various templates, the contact list, law data file, and results templates. So I will be discussing those. Okay, so first, as I mentioned, providers outside of the service area. I just put it on here. And the department also last week issued a refreshed set of FAQs. So I highly encourage you to review those, in detail. So I will be, various points in the slides, I've called out some of the FAQs or footnotes in the methodology where you can get further information. But you'll definitely want to pay attention to this because this is a change from previous years with including providers that are outside of your service area for the survey. Okay, and the selection date, as with past years, you must include providers in your plan network as of December 31st of the previous year. I actually jumped up into this slide last night based on late-breaking clarification from the department because the methodology actually removed the statement that was in there last year that said plans were are permitted to omit providers no longer with the plan as of March 31st. They admitted that from the methodology this year. So I sent an email to the department to seek clarification on this, and they got back to me yesterday and confirmed that no, that's not a change. Plans are, in fact, still permitted to omit providers no longer as the plan's network as of March 31st. So I can share. I'm assuming they'll be adding that to their FAQs. We oftentimes, I know as a plan, you might be hesitant to, ask a question of the department because you don't want to put a highlight on you, but we're not shy about asking questions to the department to seek clarification. So actually, many of the FAQs, the questions on the department's FAQ document, several of them do stem from questions that we have submitted. So I expect that they will be incorporating this in their FAQ, but I will, of course, share the department's email response with you after this webinar. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the methodology in footnote 15 also has a provision about quote-unquote deemed ineligible providers. So this is for cases where you've already finalized your contact list, you're ready for fielding, you've done your sampling, and then you already know some providers have turned and they're going to be ineligible. Well, you can't take those providers off the list, but the department has added this provision where you are permitted not to actually send a survey, and you can mark that provider as ineligible on your raw data file and move on and replace them with another provider from your older sample. So, if you plan to do something like this, we'll talk to you in our one-on-one meetings about how the logistics for that. And then also another important element is pediatric providers. This is another question we submitted to the department. We ask every year because it's not always clear because sometimes the department removes language or adds language. So the department did confirm that if a pediatric provider falls in one of the provider survey types, such as a specialty, like a pediatric gastroenterologist, then that provider would be included. So the FAQ number 38 has the department's response on that. Okay. And then here's just a snapshot of the provider survey type for 2019. And I'll point out some notable changes. So as I stated before, it's remained the 5 survey types that we've had in previous years. Primary care providers are basically the same as of last year. Plans are to include non-physician medical practitioners, nurse practitioners, which are nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, only if they have agreed to serve as a PCP and offer enrolling appointments. So that's something to review and confirm before including those types of providers on your contact list. And that's something we talked with you during the pre-validation process. But this is exactly the same as last year. The only difference is that the department coined this new term, the NPMP, for these providers, but that's the same. There is a change about including advanced access PCPs, and I'm going to go into more detail in later slides about this provision. And then, luckily, again, specialist positions, it's the 3 same buckets as last year. There we had some concern with the previous draft methodology because the department was initially planning to expand the specialist type to up to 15 specialist position types, which would have been a huge change and a big burden. So luckily they stepped back on that approach and kept it the same 3 types. I will say the 2019 methodology or definition of these three types are a little more broad. Last year, the department, was very specific about the certain specialty, subspecialty certification for each. For example, it has to be internal medicine, cardiovascular disease. So, which, then plans were confused whether, pediatric providers were to be included or not. So is this methodology just has to be general? If they're a specialty physician in one of those three buckets, then they can be included. Psychiatrists is the same as last year. The main difference is they finally have their own template. So last year, they were to be included on the specialist template, but still reported as its own survey type. So this year, as it should be, they're on their own contact list template. The biggest change is to the non-physician mental health provider contact list. This year, the department, I really like this change, is a lot more specific, and it's tied to 4 specific licensure types that the non-physician mental health providers need to have to be included on the contact list. Last year's methodology and actually previous years were kind of difficult to figure out who to include. It was more based on the type of degree the providers had. They had to be a master's degree or PhD, and plans don't really capture that information. And the methodology listed out 14 possible subspecialties that will fall in this bucket, like school psychologists, the behavioral analyst, BCBA. So I think that's going to be the biggest difference is the BCBA providers, which were always kind of a difficult segment to get the information for. So the department did clarify if you have a provider that is an autism provider that has one of these 4 certificate license types listed above, then they should be included. But BCBA is not one of those license types. Okay, and then the main change for the ancillary providers is that the MRI entities are no longer included, so it's planned to include facilities or entities that provide mammogram or physical therapy appointments. Okay. And just before I go on to this, I just encourage parents to go back to the methodology and review the provider, that portion of the, who to include on the provider contact list, just so you have a good understanding of that. And you can obviously always ask us questions. Okay, thank you, provider.
Oh, sure. Just one quick, I'm thinking we should pause and see if there's any questions at this point. Any questions? Okay, looks like there are no questions. Go ahead.
And again, you can always, ask your questions directly or type them in. I think we have that ability as well. Okay, so as in past years, you have to deduplicate the provider contact list, and so it's the same. Really, the deduplication is based on county and network, the same as last year. So that's good. There's no big change there. Although the department really did simplify the deduplication rules last year, they kind of had different rules for each provider type, and it was a little confusing. And then also SQHCs how to deduplicate those were a bit confusing because last year the SQHC name was entered on the provider medical group field of the contact list, which was very weird. So I'll speak later about that. But so the deduplication rules are a lot more streamlined and clearer this year. And then also for SQHCs last year, the deduplication rules tend not to take the NTI of SQHC into consideration, which really kind of pared down the list a lot more. So this year MPI is taken into consideration, and again, it's the entity MPI, not the individual provider and MPI. So I really like that change. And then another, actually a big change for this year is the contact list template has been updated to include a unique provider field. And that unique provider field is to indicate whether a provider, based on the deduplication rules, whether it's a provider in a unique provider can be surveyed or whether it's a duplicate entry. So in the past, we've done the deduplication on your behalf. This year, the contact list, because plans own the contact list, we don't want to be changing anything on your behalf. You will be entering that information on the contact list, and then we will be validating that that's done correctly during the pre-validation process. But since that is a change, definitely feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on that. Okay? Okay, and then here are three other kind of new elements that, providers to be included on the contact list. I did mention SQHCs, but this year the department also mentioned rural health clinics. Put it in the same bucket as SQHCs. Rural health clinics have not previously been specifically mentioned. They're very similar to SQHCs, but there's differences in their structure and what services they offer. So you may want to go back and see if you're capturing that information or if you have RHCs in your network to make sure that they're being included. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very pleased to see that the department updated the contact list form to include its own very separate field to enter the SQHC RHC name in its own column, rather than entering it on that provider group field, which was very confusing last year and really did not make much sense. So I think that's going to be very helpful. The other element that I mentioned earlier is the inclusion of providers that offer telehealth appointments. If a provider offers both telehealth and in-person appointments, then you would enter the provider on two different rows on your contact list. And for the methodology, for telehealth providers, you would enter actually telehealth in the county field for that provider, and then NA in the address. And then for methodology fielding purposes, we would treat telehealth as its own single virtual county when we're doing the deduplication and fielding for those providers. And then I'm just going to touch on this because then I'm going to go in more detail. It's inclusion of primary care providers offering that are participating in the plan's verified advanced access program. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as of last year, the sample and oversample sizes, there's two approaches. You can do a sample where you pull a sample of providers until the target sample size is met with an oversample for replacement, or you follow the census approach, which is all providers in the network accounting. And then plans can, decide to do a census or sample approach for each provider survey type network county combination. And then the oversample process is similar to last year, although last year the methodology set forth a minimum threshold for, the amount of providers you should pull for your oversample for replacement. And if you recall, last year we pulled from 300 to 400%, of an oversample, which was much more than the methodology required. And then we also which oftentimes would mean we did a full census. And then really the methodology is basically pushing plans to kind of follow the census because they're saying if you exhaust your oversample, and you haven't met the target sample size, you can then go back to your contact list and pull more providers and continue the survey following the random sample selection process until all the providers have been exhausted or you've reached your target sample size. Okay? Okay, and then as I mentioned previously, this year there's only one target sample size chart as opposed to last year. There were two different charts. The chart for this year aligns with the thresholds for that were set forth in last year's single county chart. So from reading the methodology footnote 12 and looking at the latest results template that was just issued on Friday by the department, it is appearing as though the department is indicating that plans, even if you do follow the census, that they're expecting plans to reach the target sample size, which is a big change from last year and a little odd because why are they having two different approaches? I have submitted a question to the department seeking clarification on this point, because I do want to make sure everyone is, has the same understanding. So as soon as I receive information from the department on this, I will be sure to share that with you. Okay. Counties with multiple networks, which is the same approach as last year, where the purpose is to reduce the burden on your providers. So we are allowed to apply a provider if a provider participates in multiple networks in a single county. We are permitted to apply the provider's response given for the largest network that they participate in that county to all smaller subset networks that provider participates in the county. If a provider participates in more than one county, though, we are required to do more than one survey, a survey for each county. Okay? And then the survey tool for this year, so again, it's very similar to last year. Again, it only includes the two appointment availability questions, one for urgent and one for non-urgent appointment dates. And then, of course, for the ancillary providers, it just has the one appointment date time question. One new change on the survey script and outlined in the methodology is for providers on leave of absence and not scheduling appointments because they're on leave of absence. So the methodology says that if the office says the providers are offering appointments because they're on leave of absence, we are to enter NA in the appointment date and time field, but we are to enter no in the compliance calculation field for that appointment. So that is a change from previous years. Okay? Okay, the survey administration time frame is similar to last year. The surveys can go up until December 31st of this year. Same as last year, 2 waves, no more than 60% per wave, and spaced 3 weeks apart. And they may be staggered by provider survey type. So that's all the same as last year. So one clarification that the department included in the methodology this year is just more clarification about when the second wave should begin, and then clarifying that it should begin based off of the final when the final survey of the first wave has been completed, not when the first wave begins. Okay. Also, there's an FAQ on that topic as well, from the FAQs that the department issued last week. And then survey administration. Last year there were 2 options for plans to follow, the extraction, the 3-step protocol, and then this year, and then alluded to earlier, there's the verified advanced access program. And then plans are permitted to kind of do different approaches, for different network county combinations. So I'll just go through the options here. So extractions, this is the same process that we had last year, manual or electronic. We don't typically focus on this part because we focus on the three-step protocol. Extraction is where you, as a plan, actually take the appointment information out of the practice management software. Okay, option 2. So this is really kind of what we do for you, the three-step protocol, which is the same approach as last year. So the 3 steps are you do the initial either you outreach to the provider either by fax or email. So you send the survey to them either by fax or email first. They have 5 business days to respond. Again, the timelines have stayed the same, so that's great. And then if the provider does not respond by the timeline, then, actually, you send the survey, then it's optional to send a survey reminder. That is our process. We do send a survey reminder within 2 business days of the initial invitation. And then if the provider does not respond by the deadline, then we send the survey over for a telephone survey. And then just real quick, before we start the fielding, it's very important for plan to do a communication to your provider network to let them know this survey is coming and key metrics, who we are. So the methodology outlines some elements that the department thinks is important to include in that outreach, but that is extremely important because the department is, putting such a focus on, working towards meeting the target sample size. So, it's very important for you to let your providers know that the survey is coming. Okay? And then, as I mentioned, just some more detail about the telephone survey. If it's been triggered for the telephone survey, if they haven't responded to the fax or email survey, then we're to initiate the phone survey within 6 to 15 business days. The department did make a change here where they're permitting us to, if a provider responds to the email or fax survey before the telephone survey is initiated, even though it's beyond the deadline for response for the email or fax survey, plans are permitted to use that response and not go forward with the telephone survey. And that is a change from last year where the methodology said if the provider didn't respond by the fax or email deadline, then that's it, and then it automatically goes to the phone survey. So we definitely like that change. And then for the phone survey, if you're calling and the provider is willing to have completed at a later date or time, we can either schedule a callback or can be scheduled or unscheduled. And we can also leave a voicemail and accept inbound calls. And the provider has 2 business days to respond to that. Okay? And then as I mentioned earlier about this Verified Advanced Access Program, so this has actually always been provision in the law, but the methodology hasn't really had a very good structure for capturing this information. So this is new this year, this structure, and this is for PCPs only. And so basically, advanced access programs are for offices or provider groups that have a practice of offering same-day or next business day appointments across the board for their enrollees. So in those cases, if a plan has a verified advanced access program for their PCP population, plans are allowed to actually include those providers on their raw data file and automatically deem those providers as having compliant appointments or urgent and non-urgent without having to contact those providers. So that's a really great change. One thing to be careful about here is that, the plan really needs to have documentation that they have reviewed, have a structured program for these providers that's been reviewed by their quality assurance system, and you have good documentation that your providers meet those criteria. So if you do feel like you have providers that fall, PCPs that fall within this bucket, definitely contact us and we'll work with you on how the survey will go for that. Okay? And then this is just a visual representation of what I've talked about. As you can tell, there are lots of moving parts, lots of timelines to manage. Administering the survey requires a lot of daily monitoring and lots of processes going on. I'm not going to go into details because I'll let you have this slide will be part of the PowerPoint that you can have, and we can also, if you request, send this as a freestanding document to you. Okay? All right, so the provider dispositions, other than eligible and completed a survey, there are providers could be deemed ineligible. And then in such a case, the provider would, when you're following this survey approach, you mark them as ineligible on the raw data file and then replace them with another provider from the oversample. So fortunately, all of these elements outlined here for a provider to be marked as ineligible are all the same from last year. So that's really good. If the provider says they're not in your network or they're not part of your health plan, if they're not in the county, they're ceasing their practice or retired, or incorrect specialty. This contact information issue, so if they're listed under the wrong contact information, incorrect phone number or fax number, email, that could come up not only for a bad number, or it could come up if, we contact the office and they say, oh, we don't have a provider by that name here. So in that case, okay, we have the wrong contact information, so that would be ineligible. And then provider doesn't offer appointments at all. So they're just a hospital-based appointment provider or offer peer-to-peer services. Actually, this came up a lot of times with the behavioral health providers and the non-physician mental health, because the way they offer their services, it's like in-home or they are kind of unique. So I think hopefully this will not come up as often this year with the change in the types of providers to be included. Okay? And then there's also non-responding providers. And then again, if the provider does not respond, either they're refused, declined to respond, or there's no response, then they will be marked as so on the raw data file and replaced with a provider from the oversample. I'm going to go into more detail later about how, our approach for, refusals, potential refusals, no responses, the efforts that we do in order to just not take that first, not automatically just take a busy signal of no response and move on. We go through many efforts in order to get a response, and I'll talk about that in more detail. Okay? All right, and then these are exactly the same as last year. So if a provider says the appointment time or date depends on whether they're a new or existing patient, we're allowed to take whatever is the earliest appointment. We ask about both, but we enter the one which is the soonest available. And then if they say providers come in on a walk-in basis, we ask about when is the next available appointment for that the patient can be seen. It's very important that we capture, we communicate to the provider, not the first available of the day, which We saw last year that sometimes the providers would give that to us in either their fax or email response, or so it's important that we put lots of parameters in this year to really highlight that we're asking for the next available appointment of the day. Okay, and then this is the same as last year. The methodology still does not allow us to ask if another provider in the office is available to see the patient sooner if the first provider can't meet the timeline. So that's the same as last year. And then similar to last year, if the provider, we're calling a particular office, and the provider has, a different office in that same county that has a sooner appointment, then we can take that appointment, but it has to be in that same county and with that same provider. And then FQHCs, again, it's not based off of any individual provider in that FQHC. It's just tied to that FQHC entity within any site within that county for the appointment. Okay? And then I'm just going to mention this again. I already touched upon this when I talked about the survey tool. So there are two instances where we would enter NA in the appointment date and time field. So same as last year, one if they indicate that they don't offer that type of appointment at all. We would record NA in the appointment date and time field, and in that case we would actually record NA in the compliance calculation field. The difference here for the next one is if they say they're on leave of absence or vacation, and so they're not scheduling appointments at all, we enter NA in the appointment date and time field, but we are to enter N in the compliance calculation field in that case.
Stacey, I think we should pause for questions just to check out.
We answered a lot of information.
So, are there any questions? Okay. Alrighty. Okay, go ahead, Stacey.
Okay. I know I'm running through a lot of information fairly quickly in order to get through everything. But again, definitely feel free to ask questions or reach out to us if you have any. Okay, plan-to-plan agreement. The department always, has, different options about how to their approach to how plans should report for plan-to-plan agreements. The methodology has two approaches. One, if a secondary plan also submits their own timely access compliance report, or two, if the secondary plan does not submit a timely access report. So if your secondary plan also submits a timely access report, you need to indicate that relationship in your portal. And then the secondary plan surveys and submits their own separate PAAS templates to the primary plan that's filed in the other plan network tab of the portal. And then if the secondary plan does not submit a timely access compliance report, the primary plan includes that data in their own template. So if you have plan-to-plan agreements, I highly recommend you reaching out to either your licensing counsel and your plan partner to get on the same page prior to fielding, to make sure you have the proper understanding about who's doing what, how you're going to be filing the templates ahead of time. So you know best about your own plan-to-plan agreement structure. So that's my recommendation for that. Okay. So now I'm just going to go over a few of the template changes. So contact list, there are several new fields in the contact list template this year. So you'll really want, if you haven't completed yours yet, to take a look at those instructions very carefully. and make sure you're capturing that information. You have that information in your system. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a new separate field to enter the FQHC RHD name, which I am very happy about. And then, as I mentioned earlier, since plans are now required to include contracted providers that are outside of the service area, the department has updated the contact list template to allow for non-California licenses in states. Also, there's a field to indicate if a provider is a telehealth provider or not. There's a field to indicate, as I mentioned earlier, if the provider is a unique provider based on the deduplication rules. And then if a provider is part of the plans in that advanced access program. There's also a new terminology tab, which is a bit confusing because in reviewing it, I noticed that the terminology tab kind of includes some provider types that you really are not supposed to be entering in each particular contact list based on the methodology requirements. The terminology tab is intended to give you an example of your network filing plan crosswalk for that survey type, what kind of provider types you might have in that contact list. But like I said, I noticed that there were some errors in there. So I did submit a question to the department about that, and they did acknowledge that this is just meant as an example and not, not to use all of those provider types that are in there. The department's response is captured in the FAQ documents. So you can reference that as well. And then the remove fields. So another big change is, if you recall, last year there were up to 20 fields to enter the network name on one row. The department has changed that and only includes one network name field. So if a provider participates in more than one network, that is to be entered on a different row of the contact list. So that may seem, the contact list is going to be really long because of that change. We think that's actually a good change because it makes your deduplication a lot clearer. There were a lot of kind of confusion and complications last year when network names were entered differently, or sometimes entered on one line and sometimes entered on two lines, and so this is just going to be a lot cleaner and help with the deduplication. So we like that change. Also, the clinic's name field is removed. Again, I think that caused confusion with FQHCs. So that field has been removed. And then the plan removed the health plan ID for plan-to-plan contract field. Okay. And then for the raw data template, so obviously the raw data template captures all of the fields and new and changed fields from the contact list that I already reviewed. In addition to that, the raw data file has a new field to indicate whether the plan follows the random sample or census approach for each record. Okay, and then kind of the biggest template change is the results template. The department actually just issued their final version of that template on Friday. So we're still, reviewing it, to see if there were changes from the draft version that they submitted for comment. But this template, instead of having a different template for each provider survey type, like they have done in the past and as they do for the raw data files, now it's just combined into one template. So each provider survey type has their own separate tab in this one combined template. And then another big change is there are additional tabs in this file which takes the data from each of the various tabs and puts them in another summary rate of compliance tab, which is weighted rates of compliance. And then, so you'll really want to take a look at that. And then also a big change is that plans may no longer enter NA under the target sample size achieved field when a census approach is used, as was, allowed in measurement year 2018. So, like I said, I've submitted a comment to the department seeking clarification on this and what their expectations are when plans do follow the census approach, and actually reach out, survey every single available provider in the network in county. So I'll let you know as soon as I receive a response on that. Okay. And then this is just kind of a visual representation of our wave and dark period approach. Kim, I don't know if you want to just walk us through this a little bit. It's just very high level.
Sure, and I'll go relatively quickly, I think, but this is just illustrating how the actual fielding of the survey itself. So as Stacy noted earlier, we have two waves of surveys, and for a given survey type, we are trying to do 50 to 60% of all these surveys in each wave. That's a requirement. And in between each wave, we need a dark period or no contact of a minimum of 3 weeks. But that's by survey type. So we've listed under each wave kind of weeks, or we call them wavelets when we send out when we interview a set of providers. We tend to do it by survey type. That makes it a little clearer when we're trying to demonstrate the dark period from the first wave to the second wave. But sometimes, depending upon the size of a health plan population, we might do multiple survey types at a time. So you'll see PCP, then specialists, then psych, then we've noted combo, then non-physician mental health, and then ancillary. And so the actual, as it goes through, will vary a little bit by health plan. Sometimes we combine our interviews for different health plans. Sometimes we don't. It just depends upon how the data flows into us. We want to make sure that we get started pretty soon, so we have the most time to ensure that we can satisfy the target sample size completion. And then you'll see across the bottom we'll have interim reporting throughout the process to demonstrate where we're at and assess what's going on. And then,
okay, so Dr. Suzanne again, to give Stacey a break, I'm sure she needs to pick up the water. Thanks, Stacey. So overall, kind of what you've heard are a lot of information on the methodology, references to the FAQs, which come out quite regularly, and we constantly monitor those. And also, the regulatory requirements that are, kind of outlined with regard to advanced access and other areas that are contained, that Stacey went over and are contained on the slide. So we're always adherent to what the requirements are. Our approach, too, which is not indicated here, but I wanted to mention to all of you, is that we are very actively involved with the department, meaning that any meetings that are in person in Sacramento, both Jim and I or one of us will attend those sessions. We also join all of the calls as much as possible, actually all of the calls related to timely access. It's really important that we are your voice and that we communicate all of the nuances that we are identifying, or any kind of questions that we can ask on your behalf, or questions that we have, as Stacey mentioned, that we're relaying those to the department. And so sometimes we, like you, get a little frustrated with the methodology and kind of how it's set up. And other times, we are able to kind of voice any recommendations for improvement. And so we're pretty well known at the department and have a really good relationship. So we want to just make sure that you know that we got your back in this area and are always trying to kind of ensure that they are aware of a lot of the nuances in the methodology. The other piece is, as Stacey mentioned, is we have so much advantages because we are a survey administrator as well as a validator. And so the DMHC specifically kind of outlined how our audit background really subtly grounds us in that audit kind of process and approach to conducting the survey, looking at improvements every year, the lessons learned that we have with you. We share some of our templates with the department. And so it helps us to not only learn from the validation process and survey administration process and integrate those into programmatic improvements and also more qualitative improvements in the process. We also try to, we do have educational or follow-up lessons learned calls with you as part of when we wrap up the year. And of course, this kickoff call is really important to provide the education to you so that you have reference material and resources and really have an understanding that, it's our business and our prerogative and our goal as your vendor to always be on top of all of the methodology changes. The one thing that we implemented last year that was brand new, and I believe we were the first vendor to offer this, is the pre-validation of your data. And some of you may think, well, why did you guys do that? We did that because we noticed that if we implemented a pre-assessment or pre-validation of your data before starting the administration process, it allows us an opportunity to kind of fully vet your contact list by looking at the formatting, field completeness of the contact list, but also reconcile against your network filing. And then in return, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, did we fill this out correctly? Is this an accurate reflection? The contact list is an accurate reflection of what the network filing is. As you know, those forms are very different. And so we had a lot of good feedback regarding the process. It is a ton of work on our end and on your end to kind of do that process, but we feel very strongly that it allows us to have much higher level of certainty that the data is clean or cleaner before we start the testing process and before we actually cut your sample and identify the various ways. We also want to make sure that we're providing you internal reporting so that you have a sense of where we are. The process for the methodology is really very much more complex than what it was several years ago. It's really 3 surveys wrapped into one. We have the fax piece, we have the email piece, we have the telephonic call center piece. And so there really, there's always a moving target. There's data coming in and out every single minute. And so having a moment in time just letting you know kind of where things are is really important to us. And then a comprehensive QA program is really important. We QA records from the fax methodology or the fax modality, the email modality, as well as the call center modality, making sure that the data is coming back accurately and that data is not dropping off in any way. So that's our general approach, and I'm going to pass it back over to Stacy so she can talk a little bit about our operational procedures that are really not called out within methodology, but these are processes we've put into place to help always increase not only the respondents, but it's to help you meet target sample size, but also to have really strong processes for you. Stacy?
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the department is putting such an emphasis on working to meet target sample sizes, and we've really learned that for the most part, we really just need to take a census approach wherever we can. There will be cases where, if you have a very large network in a county, we would follow the oversample sample approach if we're able to, meet the target sample size for a certain provider group, provider type. We do, we might want to include more surveys just to have like a cushion in some cases. But overall, we're just trying to survey as many people, providers that we can. And then, as I mentioned before about the, refusal, no response disposition, we really don't, want to use that. We want to put as many efforts as we can to attempt to contact the provider. So we have processes in place to, have several attempts if we receive like a busy signal or a bad, bad fax or, Oh, one sec. Could you, I think there's some background noise, so if you could all just put your phone on mute, that would be great. Thanks. So for I think there's still someone who's not on mute. Okay, so I'll continue. So for, say on your contact list you have, several numbers, fax numbers, then we're going to, attempt all of those numbers at least 3 times if it's busy. Also another element with email, because we don't always know if, a firewall blocked the email or went to the provider's junk mail or what happened there. We, in our email communications, include a link, for the providers to email us directly, and we have a provider inquiry inbox, and we monitor those daily. And, that was very helpful. I thought last year I was actually the one who would respond to the emails, and it kind of helps have a good relationship with your providers. Sometimes they would ask, I received this survey, what is this? I'm not sure what this is. So I was able to give more background and ease their mind and, thank them for participating in the survey. Or, if they have any questions, I can research and get right back to them with the information that I needed to kind of, be that liaison in your behalf. And then also for the telephones, again, if it's busy, disconnected, no answer, clear the whole time, any unsuccessful outreach calls, then we have a program set up to, try again for every single number listed on that file, and have, a 30-minute, have a break in between attempts, really to put effort to try to contact your providers. And then we had this term white glove approach. It really is just kind of a term we've put together for any unique processes that we might need to implement, specifically for contact numbers or email addresses that are linked to many providers, and we set that threshold at 10 or more. So we really don't want an unsuspecting provider's office to be inundated with, tons of faxes or phone calls or emails, and then get overwhelmed and not knowing it's coming, or then they would just ignore it and, not respond to it and whatnot. So we have actually added our pre-validation analysis of your contact list. We made it more robust this year to have more of an in-depth analysis of your network, and so we call out any contact numbers that are linked to 10 or more providers based on the deduplicated provider list. So we can have a conversation with you about that, saying we see this issue, how do you want to handle it? Do you have other contact numbers that you can put in there instead? Do you want to reach out to your providers? How do we want to handle it? So this is just an important conversation to have before we get out into the field and cities. Okay. And then we mentioned earlier interim reports. The purpose is to just give you kind of a snapshot of how you're progressing towards meeting your target sample size for each of your provider survey types during the fielding campaign. It shows you the, broken down by, the percent ineligible, non-responder, completed survey by provider type, and then it'll be broken down by network and county. It'll be really important for you to review those reports and, take a look if you have providers, certain areas where you're not performing as well as you would like to see. It's really important for you to reach out to your provider network or that cohort of your provider population to really communicate to them about this survey and encourage them to participate.
Okay, this is Suzanne again. Are there any questions? We have a quiet group this time. And there were questions that were asked yesterday, just let folks know, and we will be sending out what the questions were and what the responses were as well from yesterday's call. So our technology, a little bit about that. So we employ, as we talked about, fax, email, and telephonic modalities. We use a high-resolution fax out, and then also an OCR, ICR technology to read the faxes when they come back. There is still data entry that has to occur. As all of you probably know, all providers generally have a fax machine. The quality of the return images is something that we could leave aside because some images come back really, really badly, and we have to do the data entry. But we use the OCR technology to help us with some of that portion. Email technology as well. As Stacey mentioned, one of the barriers there is that we don't always know what hits spam or what gets filtered out and what actually the provider receives. That is another modality that is allowed by the methodology. And then also the telephonic, which is a computer-assisted technology that our agents utilize at the call center. Next slide. So just in summary, our quality programs and procedures, we have the quality assessment as part of the pre-survey administration that I talked about. Throughout the survey administration process, we also have QA protocols in place, and then post-survey when we're programmatically evaluating the survey results, making sure that all the data is matching up in the raw data template as well as in the results data template. Next slide. Okay, so all of you were asked at some point to complete the client questionnaire checklist nationalization form, and I know you probably were initially annoyed because it's kind of long. It grew since last year. It's about, I think, about 4 pages long. And I want to just talk a little bit about why this is so important. It may seem like a pain in putting it together, but it really not only initiates the contracting or recontracting process, but importantly helps us establish your health plan profile. That's very, very critical because it helps us know, okay, what does the provider filing or the network filing look like from what was submitted? What are some estimates on provider count and looking at the new methodology? As Stacey mentioned, there's telehealth, there's advanced access, there's other changes on the non-physician medical providers and also the NPMH. And so it helps us identify the scope of work specifically. If you're interested in validation, survey, PAAS survey, provider satisfaction, any kind of customization of services, it's very important for us to know that. It also allows you to have a checklist in which you can look through and then provide all the documentation that we need to ensure that we're fully evaluating your health plan with the various products. The attestation portion is really critical. This year we've implemented an executive level sign-off of the form because it allows us to not only solidify and say yes, not only an analyst has reviewed it and perhaps an analyst compiled it, but this is truly what our network looks like. We do have FQHCs, we do have these products, we do have these networks, we do have out-of-service area providers. We want to be sure that we have all the information necessary so that we don't miss anything. So we appreciate your patience and your participation in doing this, but it's a really, really important document that helps us to achieve all of the information that I just mentioned. So if you haven't given it to me, I'm sure I'm going to be sending you an email very soon to get that information from you. At the next few slides, I'm not going to go over into too much detail because these are covering key dates and milestones, which are going to be really specific to your health plan. All of you have an Exhibit A as part of your contract that talks about what are the deliverables, what are you responsible for, what are we responsible for, and then the associated agreed upon dates. Of course, we want to be sure that we have sufficient time to do wave 1 and wave 2 and all the various wavelets. So it's really critical, for those of you that may have gotten started a little bit later last year, it's really important that we get started earlier. And so these are milestones. You're welcome to look at the slides after this call, but in general, it gives you a sense on the months we're working on things. So what you're focusing on versus what we're focusing on from May all the way through December. So I won't go through all these bullet points. I want to make sure we have enough time for any last-minute questions. And please don't be shy to ask questions. I'm sure if you have a question, someone else has a question as well. Next slide, please. So in essence, we're really busy with not only getting your information, your network filing. We're doing, for some times, we're already in pre-validation or completed that. Then we move on to testing and configuration, doing QA of that. we have to configure and test out each modality for your plan, making sure we have your logo. If we have not received that, make sure we know where your AKAs are. So when the agents are calling out, if they don't know difference between they have a AKA or an acronym name, we want to be sure that we have that. Okay. Can someone, we can hear some background noise. If you can put your phone on mute, please. Thank you. Next slide. And then August to September, you're reviewing interim reports. We're providing that information. You're really hands-off. You want us to sit and take the lead, give you some reports, and you're good. For other clients, you want maybe regular calls. Every 2 or 3 weeks, you want to kind of have a call, to supplement the interim report. You're happy to do that. Next slide. And then in 2020, the beginning of next year, we're very, very busy. Just like you, I know you're getting ready to do your big J13 filing, is reviewing the templates. We're giving you the raw data templates, having you take a week or so to take a look at it and make sure that you understand it. If there's any questions before you compile the results template. Then we're working on validation of your compliance rate and also providing you an executive summary report. If you're a validation client, then we're also finalizing your big 30-page validation report to provide that to you as part of your J13 filing. Next slide. Go ahead, Stacey. I think you're going to cover the naming convention next.
Sure. Yeah. This is just kind of a snapshot overview. So this year we're trying to get some more standardized naming conventions. So things will be a little bit more streamlined. This is just a snapshot of our typical flow, but we will be providing you with a reference document so you'll know what the naming conventions are. If you've already provided us documents with your own naming conventions, don't worry about it. It can be going on a going forward basis. But the purpose is just to really keep things very organized and streamlined as much as possible. Okay. And then just today I mentioned the Exhibit A of the contract. The other portion, this is similar to last year. You have your box account that's secure and HIPAA compliant, so it's client specific, and so we exchange files through that box account. So that's really a good place because it has date stamping and version control. And then if you have a change in personnel, someone leaves or joins your team that you have access to that box account, please reach out and then we can grant you the appropriate access. And then this is just a page about the important resources. As you probably know, the department has changed their process for posting the various documents for timely access filing. In the past, they have been posted on the public-facing website. So I do have the link there right now because the historical documents are still currently posted on there for previous measurement years. But for measurement year 2019, the department is now posting all of the documents on the resources section of its login password protected web portal. So, there's a methodology, survey tool, all of that, also letters, whatnot. We do have all of the most current documents, but if you do receive a communication from the department, please notify us so we're in the loop because we don't have a login to that portal. And then, as you know, the various GMAC does send out various email notifications as well. And then just here's a slide with all of our contact information. As Suzanne mentioned, Erin, who has a wealth of experience and is very talented, I'm extremely excited to have her on our team, will be the main point of contact for this year, but Erin and I will be working in tandem, get, through the transition process, and Suzanne and I will be here along the way as well with any questions or guidance. But here is a slide with our contact information. If you do send an email to Erin, please, right now, you can just CC myself and Suzanne, and then we'll have we'll work with you on the transition. Okay, we've got through a lot. Again, yesterday, 5 minutes to spare. Hopefully you're not completely sick of my voice, but now that we have concluded the presentation, any last final questions from anyone on the line?
Hi, Stacey. I don't have any questions right now, but I'm sure I will later on.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very helpful.
Oh, sure. Okay. Definitely. And like I mentioned previously, we'll be having our meetings with you directly throughout the process, and you're always, welcome to send any questions you have.
When can we get a copy of the presentation and the recording? Yes, hi, this is Suzanne Mirabel. I'm so glad you're on. So we will have a recording within 24 hours, and most likely tonight, WebEx usually takes about 24 hours. We have the presentation from yesterday I can send you, but as Stacey mentioned, there was an FAQ that came out last night, so we're going to be updating the entire team. So you'll get that within tomorrow. I can send it out along with the slides, and then we'll also send a listing of the questions and what the answers were from yesterday's session. So I will go ahead and do that as soon as we get today's recording, which again should be by tomorrow. Okay, great. Thank you. You're welcome. Any other questions? Mary, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say thanks. Really informative, very appreciative of the information, and we look forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, and there's one final request, everybody. We are going to be sending a survey. I know we don't love doing surveys. It's only going to be 2 questions with a comment line. So this really helps us to make sure that you're happy with this webinar and making sure that we're covering everything. If we're talking too fast, then let us know. If we need to break it into a session, any kind of feedback you have, this is put together for you and for your knowledge. And so please let us know. It really helps us to shape the future of these webinars. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great week.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.